Have you ever wondered what really happens when a business gets bought or sold? Well, today we're getting an inside look. We've got our hands on actual industry training manuals, and we're about to walk through the exact playbook the pros use to close a deal. Let's dive in. Just look at this quote. This comes straight from a broker's training manual, and it tells you almost everything you need to know. It reveals the one word that is the absolute core of this entire business: control. For a broker, it's not just about selling, it's about controlling every single part of the conversation. Remember that word. It's the key to everything. So, what is it that separates a really successful broker from everyone else? You might think it's just about being a good salesperson, but it's way more than that. It all comes down to a very specific mindset, a way of thinking that we're going to break down right now. Now, on paper, a business broker is just a matchmaker, right? Seems pretty simple. But honestly, that's like saying a master chef just heats up food. The reality is so much more complex. The real job is a deep dive into human psychology, high-stakes strategy, and some seriously careful planning. You know, a ton of new brokers just completely crash and burn, and it's usually for the same handful of reasons. They dive in without a real plan, they don't have the right skills, and they expect to get rich overnight. But you want to know the real killer? Trying to do it all alone, without a proven playbook to follow. So what's the secret sauce then? How do the pros manage to stay on top of their game? Well, it's not about working longer hours. It's about deeply understanding the two things that can make or completely break any deal: human psychology and building absolute, rock-solid trust. And this right here, this says it all. The training manual is crystal clear on this point. A great broker is basically part psychologist. They have to be. They're constantly reading people, managing big emotions, both excitement and fear, and solving problems that have absolutely nothing to do with the numbers on a spreadsheet. Okay, let's get to the million-dollar question, and I mean that literally. How in the world do you figure out what a business is actually worth? It's not as straightforward as you might think. It's this fascinating mix of hard science and, honestly, a little bit of art. So, the whole process usually kicks off with some industry rules of thumb, kind of like these. A local pizzeria, that might be valued based on its weekly sales, but a software company is all about a multiple of its earnings, or EBITDA. And if you're not familiar, EBITDA is just a fancy acronym for earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. These are the basic formulas, the jumping off point for any negotiation. But that simple formula, that's just the start. The real value of a business gets shaped by a whole bunch of other things. I mean, think about it. Is the business in a killer location? Does it have a long history of making money? And here's a huge one. Are the best employees going to stick around after the sale? Any one of these factors can completely change the final price tag. All right, so once there's a price in mind, the broker shifts into the next phase, locking the deal down. And this is where that idea of control becomes absolutely critical. It's not just about making the process run smoothly. It's about protecting their commission. And they do this through what the manual explicitly calls a paper trail. Nothing, and I mean nothing, happens with just a handshake. The buyer has to sign a non-disclosure agreement. The seller signs an exclusive listing agreement, and then both of them sign off on the terms and the commission. Every single step is put on paper. And here we are again, right back to that central theme of control. The playbook is incredibly blunt about this. The broker needs to be the buffer between the buyer and seller. And why is that? Well, yeah, it helps with negotiations, but it's also a defensive strategy. It's to make sure the buyer and seller don't try to cut a private deal on the side and leave the broker with nothing. So, what happens if the buyer or seller says, "Hey, can we just talk to each other directly?" A well-trained broker has a script ready for that exact moment. They'll use a line just like this one to gently steer things back, keeping themselves right in the middle of the whole conversation. It's a subtle tactic, but it's incredibly powerful. See, it's almost never a simple deal between just two people. The broker has to manage a whole cast of characters. You've got lawyers, accountants, sometimes even a nervous spouse. And they all have their own opinions and egos. It can be a total minefield. And this is where the strategy gets really, really clever. A smart broker knows they aren't just selling to the buyer. They're selling to the buyer's entire inner circle. By taking the time to educate everyone involved, the attorney, the accountant, they start building a consensus and gently guiding the entire group toward a yes. And get this, the training manual flat out warns that lawyers and accountants are often deal killers. It even gives brokers specific tactics for how to handle them. For example, if an attorney tries to intimidate them with legal jargon, or an accountant only looks at the official books and ignores any cash business, the broker is trained to stand their ground and position themselves as the one true expert on this specific deal. So, after all the mind games, all the strategy, all that paperwork, we finally get to the last act. How does this whole thing actually come to a close? And, maybe most importantly, how does the broker finally get that big payday? So let's talk numbers. This is the payoff. A broker's commission is typically going to land somewhere in the 10 to 12% range of the total sale price. And for smaller businesses, they'll usually have a minimal fee just to make sure all their hard work is properly compensated. Even in these final moments, the broker is still the conductor of the orchestra. They're the ones making the introductions between lawyers, managing the final contract, and handling the handoff of leases and vendors. And check out that last point. Employees are often the absolute last to know. That is a very deliberate move to prevent any drama or panic from sinking the deal at the last second. And finally, we get to this moment, the moment it has all been building toward. After weeks or even months of intense work, the deal is finally done. The papers are signed, hands are shaken, and the business officially has a new owner. So there you have it. That's the insider's playbook. It's this hidden world of strategy, psychology, and of course, control. And this is happening every single day, right under our noses. Now that you've seen how the game is played, it kind of makes you wonder, doesn't it? If you were on either side of that table, how would you play it differently?